gorgeous fall of Maine, huh? Is it not beautiful?
And this day is supposed to hit 80 degrees, did we just hear?
Oh, that's right. I meant late summer.
It's
what I
feeling
meant, yeah.
tropical weather out there. So, Noel, your name is obviously known by people worldwide, but some people don't realize what a role you played in this very radio station's origins.
Oh, well, yes, and yet some people tend to exaggerate them, Dennis.
Oh, could that be what I'm doing?
I think so. I mean, Peter, Paul, and Mary became incredibly well known, not in small part because they were the right people at the right time to sing the right songs. The songs, many of them had been around for years, but we articulated, in a sense, a concern of the times for equity, and that for 50 years became kind of the opportunity to express for many people who had no voice fairness in the democratic circumstance, fairness in global relationships, fairness amongst unions. I mean, so I get a lot more credit, in a sense, for being at the right place at the right time. And the radio station, frankly, is not much different. I happen to be, with my wife, a follower of the heart. And we had bought a hen house on the coast of Maine before we bought any other property, because it was the only place we really fell in love with. And by virtue of that, and its being halved by my dad, who moved here with my mom in the 70s, we were able to construct a home for just about anything that wanted to be there. It was from an animation studio to my 8-track recording studio where David Mallet performed and sang, and Tim Sample, and even Vaughn Meter came and did some work there. People at home now are saying, Vaughn who? Anyway, the fact of the matter is, when two of my good friends, David Snyder and Reg Bennett, came to me and said, you know, Noel, this community could really use a radio station. I looked at the funds that were accumulating by virtue of the Wedding Songs success, and I said, okay, let's spend some money finding out how much it would cost to put a radio station together. And not inexpensively, certainly by today's standards, very inexpensively, a kind of grassroots support grew, and before you knew it, there in the ground floor of the hen house was a control board, a lot more knobs on it than the one that you're currently using, a great old guy by the name of Don McKillop climbing transmitters out on Blue Hill to make sure that WERU had a voice, and then unfortunately a little bit too much of a voice that bordered on the television station and distorted people's watching of whatever it was they wanted to watch on Channel 7, I think. But all of that got worked out, and in the process, instead of being known as the person who encouraged the radio station, I probably now carry with me the label, oh yeah, he's the guy that started the radio station. Well, that's not quite the case, but I'm glad, as always, to be associated, and I'm looking forward to the WERU thing down in Southwest Harbor, and being able to sing a song that's been part of WERU's history since 1974, when it was written. That's the building block. If you can find us somewhere on a Reel to Reel album, maybe it'll be worth playing at the end of this interview.
It's actually on WERU's first CD too, which is in our various artists compilation section. Yeah, the building
Somebody's going to run and find it.
That's right. We should mention that WERU is in its 30th year this year, an anniversary year for us, and we do have, as you just mentioned, an upcoming concert, fundraiser, and friend-raiser, of course, on October 20th. But you're here today to mention another gig which is happening this weekend for yet another anniversary, more than double the amount of years this radio station has been here.
Yeah, I think so. Steve Rappaport was talking to me yesterday. He writes for the Ellsworth American, and when we got together in email before we actually met for the interview, the subject line of his email was "Grand at 80," and I thought, well, if he's talking about me, I'm taking that as a compliment.
And you are.
Because both you and the Grand are turning or are 80 this year.
That's right.
Well, we are on Facebook Live as well as WERU Live with Noel Paul Stookey. So performances like this are fairly rare. You do get out and perform in the area, but it's not every week, and it's not every weekend.
No, in 2012, I really turned on the afterburners. I hit 8-9 cities in the state of Maine, all within a month and a half, and put it out actually on an album in a dual CD DVD called At Home. I felt really good about that. I mean, it's a man and his guitar. You know, there's no band traveling with me, but it's a man and his guitar and a lot of Downeasterners in the audience as well. But you're right. Since that time, I've kind of tucked it in. Somebody asked me just yesterday, aren't you going to miss being creative? And I tried to parse the term creative, and I said, you know, I think creative is the active articulation of imagination. In other words, imagination happens first, then the creativity is the actual product or the production of what it is you thought of. And I said, as long as I got a brain that functions, I'm going to be happy living in the land of imagination. You know, I don't necessarily have to go out and, you know, pound the boards. So I probably will continue to do fewer and fewer concerts, but I hope to be just as active. Maybe even I can get a gig here at this radio station.
I think the door is always open here for in-studio visits, live performances. And you have been somebody who's been making music for, we may say, over half a century now. Can you ever really wash that creative vibe out of your system?
You know, inheriting the legacy of folk music means that you also inherit a BS detector. And you say to yourself, when an idea comes for a song, okay, is this just a Burma Shave sign or is this really a song? And I've had a few Burma Shave signs in my life that I just, you know, wrote a verse or a couple of thoughts about. So the short answer to your question is, as long as I feel there's something important to say, I'll do my best to say it.
And you're referring, of course, to music that is used to maybe sell things or just be created for commercial purposes. You're still creating music that comes from the heart and the soul. You're not looking for a quick jingle, or you don't want your music to be in a beer commercial. You're not Genesis.
I mean, I have a lot of trouble with people who even want to bend the wedding song into the sale of silverware at their jewelry store. So, yeah.
Well, now, for people listening right now who want to keep up with what you're doing, but perhaps can't make it to the Grand for their 80th celebration this weekend, or for our event coming up in a few weeks, you were one of the first performers I've always felt to really jump on the internet and be proactive from the very beginning.
Were you there when I had the BBS?
I feel like I was. Was that in the late 90s, mid 90s?
No, it was late 80s.
Was it even that early?
Yeah, a bulletin board system.
In the early days of a modem.
Modems, 12 telephone lines coming into one computer, and being able to talk to each other with ticker tape chat lines across the bottom, middle, and top of the screen. That was really state of the art.
Names like CompuServe, which are gone now.
I know, but AOL hangs on, doesn't
They
it?
do.
Yeah,
They do.
Amazing.
And so, as somebody who's always been on the cusp of technology while making folk music,
I know, weird.
where can people learn more about you? You have an active website, correct?
I do. I have a really great crew who keeps me active. Not that I do bogus Facebook stuff, but I try to post a photograph of what it is and where I've been. I certainly keep all my lyrics up to date. And between the Peter, Paul, and Mary site, which is still happening, and which talks about Peter's solo performances and mine, and the music that's there, then there are the separate YouTubes that show up. Certainly when that unfortunate disaster occurred in November 2 years ago. A song called Impeachable was virally rewarded with over 1 million hits. So there is another persona. You know, I do have a solo career that actually, you know, in a funny kind of way, Dennis, parallels my move to Maine. And it was part of the reason I moved to Maine, not to have a solo career, but to find my own identity in the context of a group. Now, that's not to say that Peter, Paul, and Mary weren't very generous in terms of the way we related to one another. We always were individuals. I feel sorry for groups that are called the Way Watchers or whatever, you know, and they, who am I? I'm Jimmy Gillespie and I play bass in the Way Watchers, you know, who are looking for that kind of identity. We always had a personal identity. But to be able to withdraw from the intense scrutiny of a worldwide public and rather spend my time with more with family and on the coast of such a beautiful state, and get to know, you know, why subtlety is still alive in the state of Maine, you know, where it's very hard to find it everywhere else. That's been a great gift for me.
And you still, in the last 9 years, have performed some gigs with Peter, so there is still a chance to see Peter and Paul together even after the loss of Mary, as a duo.
We're doing maybe 10 shows this year. One down in Lexington, Massachusetts, and Buffalo, New York. And the curious thing is, you know, because the audience knows all the tunes and they're there for the Peter, Paul, and Mary nostalgia, they actually take Mary's part on at least a half dozen of the tunes that happen. Yeah, sweet.
Noel Paul Stookey is live in the WERU studio today. This is On the Wing, and thanks once again to Melisenda for letting us pop in and take over your studio. One final question, though. We are on Facebook Live as well, and I have to ask it based on something you just mentioned about that November a couple years ago. I need to ask this. So 50 years ago or so, some of us were not quite yet born, but we look back to that era as you mentioned, a very fertile time with musicians who were writing songs that applied. You were the right musicians at the right times with the right songs. Did you ever think, as that young man in the late 1960s, that the songs you were singing and the causes you supported would feel under attack or in a crisis 50 years later?
I think we had most fervent hope that the optimism and the sense of community that was engulfing the United States at that point in history, 1962 through 68, 69, was going to change the world. That, and you know, the wall was going to fall in Russia, the man was going to walk on the moon, the accomplishments of human beings was laced with kindness and courtesy and equality. And you're right, it became very sobering and disappointing to see it snatched from those who deeply cared for the future of the country and the world. But, you know, as most people know, I went through quite a spiritual change in the late 60s, early 70s. And it's become increasingly obvious that the enemy is bigger than the one who pulls the trigger. You know, the enemy is at the heart, or attempts to arrive at the heart of each of us. And so we are all on a personal revolution. You know, I mean, we have to do battle with our own demons and then bring that strength that we find in the forgiveness of love and togetherness together. It is not, there's a line in a song, as a matter of fact, I wrote called Revolution, one of my favorite lines, he said himself. We're a raggle-taggle army, got no uniform or guns. Still, we've been called by coincidence, so maybe we're the ones to take this revolution to the street. Wave at every solitary person that we meet. Wave at total strangers, no matter where they're from. We're going to win this revolution one by one. I still believe that.
Thank you so much for being here today, Noel Paul Stookey. Quoting one of your songs, let's go to a song now that I think puts the unity in community, and it's been doing it for 30 years. It's on our first CD, and you referred to it earlier in the interview. Let's go out today from this live Facebook chat and this live on-air interview with Building Block by Noel Paul Stookey. Thanks again, and good luck this weekend.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sam.
Whoops. There.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Dennis, that was beautiful.
Well,
He's a good mentor.
oh, thank you. No, it's good to have somebody who's done a lot.
Signing off Facebook now. Tune into the radio station.
Oh my God.